by I want this button to be tagged with an integer, the number 7. So I can uniquely identify it later when the user touches this button, independent of the aesthetics. So notice, this is fundamentally different. This is the difference between view and really the model here, where the UI button is a model class. I want there to be a numeric piece of data associated with this button in addition to the aesthetic string that coincidentally is on top. And I can make this distinction even more explicitly. Suppose this were a really annoying ATM. I could say 7 there just to make more clear the duality of a machine-readable number and a human-readable string. So that's what's called a tag, and it's just a property of the UI view class. So I'm going to quickly do that for 8. Let me change its tag here to be 8. And let me change its tag here to be 9. This is not something you always have to do. This is just because I thought this through and I realized I want to touch any of 9 or so buttons. I need to be able to determine with the same method which button the user touched. Yeah?
So is the tag just an ID that you're interpreting as an int? Or is
it is an int called tag, and I can use it however I want. Okay. It's typically used with enum constants if I were doing it in code.
So it's not like an ID in an HTML tag?
It's not a unique ID. There can be duplicates. Hence the name tag. So let me do this quickly now. I'm going to copy and paste these 3 buttons here. Let me quickly change this to 4, to 5, to 6. Let me quickly change their tags by scrolling down here. Tag, this is going to be 6. This tag is going to be 5. This tag is going to be 4. All right, and now let me, one more time, copy, paste. All right, this is going to be 1. This is going to be 2. This is going to be 3. Now I just quickly have to change this. 3. This is why, at this point, code with a loop would actually be kind of compelling. But this is just one-time configuration. All right, and then I need one more row of buttons, let's say. And this is going to be 0 in the middle. And let me give it a tag of 0. And then this guy here, let's call this clear. Let's call this deposit. And just to be fancy, let me change my text color to be, let's say, fern. OK. We've got a 99-cent app coming here. All right. And all right. Turns out these tags won't matter, so I'm just going to leave them as 0. But as we'll see in a moment, it's actually immaterial. So I've got that. Now let me do one more thing. I want to know my total account balance always. So let me go ahead and put a label down here. Call this balance. Let me go ahead and stretch it out to be the whole width. Let me go and change the font size to be as big as the other one, 24 point. Stretch this out further over here. Center this. And actually, we'll just say 0 initially. Make it a little taller. And then just so I have a little label to remind me of what that is, I'm just going to say balance in small text there. OK, so that's it. This is the value of something like Interface Builder. Ugly though this is, I mean, that was much quicker than I could have done it in code, figuring out the various layouts and the like. Know that there exists built-in features in Xcode whereby if I want to support a left-right rotation, I could actually tweak the definition of these things, locations, to say, that's OK. If it rotates, just grow to expand the screen or the like. So it doesn't have to all get oriented in like the top left corner, quite ugly fashion. So realize there are those features as well. But the more interesting part now is how do I actually implement the rest of this program? Well, let me go ahead and do this. I need some way of maintaining someone's account balance. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to go up to New. Let's right-click on here. Let's go to New File. I want to create a model class. Now, what's a model class? It really depends. Just like in CodeIgniter, you can create a model to represent a student or a course or a professor or whatever you want. I want to represent something like an account balance. So I'm going to choose under iOS an Objective-C class. I'm going to click Next. I'm going to call this Account. I'm going to tell it to be a subclass of NSObject. I'm going to click Next. It's going to ask me where to save it. That's fine. I want to save it inside the ATM project. And voila, what I now get over here, and I'll put it alphabetically at the top, is a generic class called account. Now, what do we need to associate with a user's bank account? Keep it simple. The balance, like how much money do they actually have? So what I'm actually going to do then is inside of the interface here in the .h file, I'm going to go ahead and say, all right, well, an account is going to have a property. I don't know what attributes it's going to have yet. It's going to be an unsigned long value called balance. Now, because this is a long, should it be copy or assign based on last week's conversation? What do you do with primitives usually? Okay, the opposite. So it was assign. Copy is used for generally pointers or strings where you want a true copy. With assign, it suffices just to copy the raw bits because it's a primitive. And this, again, just pertains to how synthesize is going to behave. Give me a setter that just does a raw copy of bits, nothing fancy. In addition, non-atomic will give me an ever so slight performance benefit so that it doesn't worry about multi-threaded code. And that's it. This gives me a property called balance associated with a class called account. Now let me give myself a little bit of functionality so that I can actually use this account. And to do that, in my M file, I'm going to go ahead and say @synthesize, and the property name is going to be balance, and it knows that, equals underscore balance, and it even knows that, enter, semicolon. And now let me go ahead and create an init method here. So I'm going to do id init, just like we did earlier, even though I'm writing it on the fly this time. So if self gets super init, and again, this is boilerplate code that you should almost always write when creating an init method. I'm going to go ahead and do self.balance gets 0, and then return self. In other words, when the account itself is constructed, initialize your balance to 0. As per our earlier conversation, I could do underscore balance gets 0, or I could use the property. I'm just going to get into the habit of using the property, the setter in this case. So that's it for an account balance. I just needed a model class to represent an account so that I can actually now do something with regard to the notion of money. So what do I next want to do? Well, I can pretty much leave alone the app delegate because I'm going to relegate almost all of my interesting code to the view controller. So let me go into my view controller and do the interesting part now when it comes to code meeting nib files. So inside of my view controller, and if you want to sort of spoil the results, all of this code is in the ATM example in today's printout, an online code. I'm going to go ahead and import the account class, or the account header file, so I can actually use it. In terms of the view controller, I don't actually want any instance variables per se, at least ones that aren't properties, but I do want a few properties, one of which is going to be an account. So I'm going to give myself a pointer to an account, one of which is going to be a, let's say, unsigned long amount. What am I going to use this int for, do you think? What's this int going to represent in the program? Just literally that dollar amount. I need some variable, some 32 bits or 64 bits to represent the number that the user's typed in before it gets deposited in their account and in turn in the unsigned long called balance. So I'm going to put that into my view controller here who's controlling this interface. So this is my .h. App property, I need a couple other things now, and this is the new feature for now. IB outlet, interface builder outlet of type UI label, and it's going to be called arbitrarily the balance label. And then I want another property that's an IB outlet that's also a UI label that's arbitrarily going to be called deposit label. In other words, I have created an interface builder by dragging and dropping 2 labels, 3 actually, but only 2 of which I care about changing. The amount at top right and the balance at bottom middle. Programmatically, if I'm going to update those things, I need some way of wiring, so to speak, my code to that GUI interface so I can talk. And how do we do this in C? Pointers. Pointers allow you to access something elsewhere. So by saying UI outlet, this is going to allow me to create in the nib file literally a solid line from one thing to another. So we'll see that in just a moment. So as for the properties, I'm going to fly through this a little bit, mostly because we've already talked about these things. They're all going to be non-atomic, but for today, take for granted that you want to say strong almost always when a pointer is involved. Not copy, not assign, you want to say strong. But again, we'll tease that apart when we talk about memory. This case here, it's just a primitive, so I'm going to say non-atomic assign, and I'm a little anal. I just do these things alphabetically, but you can order them any way you want. Non-atomic for this one, strong, and then non-atomic strong for this one. So in short, we'll spend more time in memory management on these parentheticals, but for now, all we have is 4 properties. The only new feature in this conversation is IB outlets. And we're about to add one other detail. So in addition to these properties, I'm going to have a couple of methods associated with my controller that I can call. And these return types are going to be called IB actions. And that's the second and last new buzzword now. Clear is going to be one method. And that method, I'll tell you, is meant to clear the interface. When I hit the clear button, I want the numbers to go away. I have another IB action now whose name is going to be deposit. This is going to be the method that's called when I actually deposit a value. I have another one here, another IB action that's going to be digit. This is the method that's going to be called anytime a digit is touched on the interface. And lastly, I have another IB action that